Sometimes there's nothing more you can do than tip your cap, congratulate your opponent on a great game, and move forward and make adjustments. That's what we'll be discussing and more in This Week in Michigan Football coming up next.
It's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Just before Frizzell got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson. Flips it all the way back to the 22-yard line. Woodson's got one block, another block, one more. Touchdown.
And he's firing on a post cut. Edwards has it. 10, 5, touchdown.
To the end zone, lobs it up, one-on-one, cut. Michigan, touchdown. I can't believe this. Robinson can go the distance as well. He bounces off some hits, and they will not catch him.
Down the middle of the field.
Intercepted. In 10. McSorley looks back to his left, and he'll be sacked right away by Chase Winovich. C.J. Stroud steps up in the pocket and goes down. Michigan gets pressure. Guess who? Aiden Hutchinson. Donovan Edwards down the sideline. Gets past Ransom. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown.
7 completes this one. Oh my goodness, Travion Henderson gets waxed.
Makes a cut. First down. Spins, scores. Blake Corr puts Michigan on top in overtime.
The other direction down the seam. That's intercepted by Sainristil. Mikey Sainristil has a couple of blockers.
Okay, so there is one thing I wanted to get out of the way at the outset of this video, and that's that this is our second time recording this video, really. I recorded something yesterday morning, and I know some of you saw it, that we got some views on it. We got some comments on it, some constructive criticism, and also some less than constructive criticism, but I digress. And I really realized after recording that it was just kind of ranting and rambling and venting. It was really sloppy on my part. It wasn't well put together. It wasn't structured. It really wasn't the quality of video that you guys deserve. So we took that video down, and now we're taking shot number 2 at it. Many of you may notice I'm going on camera for these from now on, and we're trying something different from the usual type of content that I usually make over here. But I think it's something that you guys deserve. We have some segments planned. We have notes taken. I have a whole notebook full of notes right here on the game against Oklahoma this past weekend, what my thoughts are, what the big plays I think were in this game, the big statistics that kind of tell us the story of this game. We're going to do a play breakdown of the Justice Haynes run later in this video, and I'm ultimately going to give you guys my thoughts moving forward. So that's kind of the structure of this video, and that may be how we keep it going forward. And again, I apologize if you saw the first video. I know that wasn't quite up to the quality that you guys deserve. Secondly, before we really get into it, if you guys don't mind, give this video a like, help get it up into that almighty algorithm that really dictates whether a channel can grow or not. Watch for a while, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you get notified when we come out with a new video. That would be amazing. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. All right, now what were my overarching thoughts on the Oklahoma game this past weekend? Well, probably more so than any other game, it's complicated because there were times watching this game, and through the majority of this game, and I was texting my friend this the other night actually, where it felt like Oklahoma, the quality of play that they were playing at, the level that they were playing at for this game, and I would say Oklahoma played probably a B- game, where Michigan played a C to maybe C+ game at times. Defensively, by the way, Michigan actually played well in this game, and we're going to get into that later in this video. But it really felt like Oklahoma should have been up by more at certain points in the game. And I say that because looking at the advanced analytics, as many of you may know I like to do, I like to break down. At the end of the game, Michigan had a penalty EPA of plus 5.94 or something like that, nearly plus 6. The penalties that they got in this game from Oklahoma, namely the, roughing the punter, roughing the kicker that kept one of Michigan's drives alive, added points to Michigan's score at the end of the day, according to the analytics. But on the other hand, overall offensively, they ended up with a negative 5.9 or 5.8 something EPA. So all of that was undone. All of those advantageous situations they got themselves in, with the turnovers, the interceptions, the muffed punt, the, roughing the kicker penalty, what have you. There were many opportunities in this game that Michigan could have taken advantage of. So this game was a frustrating one to watch because it didn't ever feel like Michigan was playing up to Oklahoma's level, especially on third down, by the way. Third down in the red zone, key moments were where Oklahoma won this game because time after time after time, Michigan's defense, and again, they played well in this game. I thought they had a good game plan. They came out and played within the structure of the defense. They didn't do anything too crazy or wild. We didn't see a usually three-teching defensive tackle out in a wide 9 position or anything like that, like we saw in the Texas game last year. They kept Oklahoma really tight and really compressed offensively for the first couple of downs in many series. When Oklahoma first took the field after getting the ball, first down would be less than successful. Second down might get them 3 or 4 yards. And then John Mateer just flatly made a play on third down that kept drives alive. And we're going to get into that, by the way. We're going to do a new segment, one that I think you guys would like, called 3 Big Stats. We're also going to do a segment called 3 Big Plays. And we're going to talk about one play in particular kind of throughout both of those segments that I think was actually a really huge one for this game. So this one was a frustrating one, and not frustrating because I really thought that Michigan played up to Oklahoma's level, or because I thought Michigan was on Oklahoma's level when it comes to, the quality of team here. Actually, I think Oklahoma, ultimately, at the end of the day, with John Mateer being the more experienced quarterback, with them having some better, more experienced wide receivers, namely Deion Burks. By the way, Michigan, what were you doing back in the day? That guy was in Detroit. He was right there. He was right under your nose. I could go on and on about players that Michigan could have recruited through the years, but they didn't. Darius Taylor being one of them. Could you imagine this backfield with Darius Taylor in it, by the way? I actually, now that I think about it, maybe if they got Darius Taylor, the butterfly effect of that would be maybe they wouldn't get Justice Haynes, and I'd much rather have Justice. So again, I digress. It wasn't really because Michigan was, it was a frustrating game, I guess I should say, because Michigan was clearly not on Oklahoma's level. They weren't quite there. They didn't have the quarterback experience. They didn't have the offensive cohesion. And by the way, we saw that a lot with Bryce Underwood throwing balls that it looked like he was assuming receivers were going to be in spots where they didn't actually cut to. He assumed they were going to make cuts or breaks on routes that were probably like option routes that, they didn't make the same decision there. They need to be on the same page. By the way, Bryce needs to be on the same page as Chip Lindsey for a lot more of this stuff, as it turns out. But it was a frustrating game, excuse me, because while Oklahoma was playing on a higher level, and I do think ultimately at the end of the day, we have to admit Oklahoma's a higher quality team. I actually think this Oklahoma team might be, dare I say it, the best team in the SEC, given what we've seen from, LSU struggled to beat a Clemson team that just struggled to beat Troy, and Alabama just got Cam Newtoned by Florida State. I mean, they got ran through by Florida State. So Oklahoma might actually be top tier SEC this year. It was a frustrating game because Oklahoma was trying to keep Michigan in the game. They were doing as much as they could. They were giving up the muff punts. They were throwing interceptions. They were, roughing the kicker. They were committing penalties that kept Michigan drives alive. They kept Michigan in advantageous positions. And unfortunately, Michigan just did not know, was ill-equipped, was too inexperienced to take advantage of those opportunities. So that's really my overarching thoughts on the game. Let's get into 3 big stats right here. All right, so this is where I really have to apologize for the audio quality on this one, because 1, I'm fighting a cold, and 2, I record these while my little guy is doing his kind of independent playtime / little TV time in the mornings. He's watching Miss Rachel around the corner. Actually, I have the door opened right over here so I can kind of keep an eye on him. So if you hear a little guy in the background, shout outs to little guy. He's 3 years old. He's just getting used to college football. He's just becoming aware of college football. And don't worry, we've already got him on the track to being a Michigan fan. And then 2, I'm fighting a cold. So if I cough a bit, I'm so sorry. I'll try to mute it or cut it out here or there, but I can't help it. Part and parcel to having a 3-year-old, by the way. But my 3 big stats. My first stat is 84-70. And you might be asking, what does that have to do with college football? That sounds like a basketball score. That sounds like nothing to do with football. Well, it actually is. That's the amount of offensive plays that each team got. Oklahoma had 84 offensive plays in this game to Michigan's just 70. And now what does that do for you over the course of a football game? Well, 1, it helps keep your offense in a rhythm. 2, it helps you get more chances to hit big plays. The more plays that you run, the more opportunities there are to open up a playbook. The more opportunities there are, just flatly, just odds-wise, just statistically speaking, that there are to hit big plays. And 3, you help win the time of possession battle, which Oklahoma did in this game. And we all know as Michigan fans, what is the usual route to Michigan winning a football game, by the way? It's running the football successfully, it's playing great defense, and it's winning the time of possession battle. Michigan actually did one of those 3 things. They didn't do the other 2. They did play good defense, but they didn't play better defense than Oklahoma in this one. And they didn't win the time of possession battle. And I think case in point here, where you really saw that stat, where it really stuck out, and again, we're going to kind of tell the story of this game right here for a minute in this 3 big stats segment, where I think that really helped Oklahoma, the fact that they had outpossessed Michigan for the bulk of the game heading into the 4th quarter, was on that drive, kind of to end the game and seal the deal, really. They were up by 8 with exactly 10 minutes left when they got the ball for one of their final few possessions, and they go on a 16-play, 78-yard drive that took up 8.5 minutes, ended in a field goal, took the lead from 8 to 11, and they kicked the ball off to Michigan with, like, what was it, a minute and a half left or 2 minutes left? I can't quite remember right. Again, got a 3-year-old. My memory is fuzzy. I don't sleep very much these days. But that's basically what sealed the game. And why was Oklahoma able to go on such a long, continuous drive, by the way, that only included like 3 or 4 passes out of like the 12 plays that they ran in that game? 16 plays. I just listed it off. Again, my memory is kind of fuzzy here. 16 plays. And out of the 16 plays, I think only 3 or 4 of them were passes. You might be asking yourself, why were they able to do that? Well, they were able to do that. They were able to control the game late in the game because Michigan's defense was just flatly tired. They had been out there for 84 minus 16 is what? Maybe some of you that are better with math would know. But they had run 60, 70 something plays up to that point, and we were just a third of the way through the 4th quarter. That was a big difference in this game to me. And the reason why Oklahoma was able to run so many plays, by the way, the reason why they were able to outpossess Michigan, the reason why they were able to tire Michigan's defense out to end the 4th quarter and really seal the deal in this game was because half of Michigan's drives in this game that actually counted, not the drive to end the game and not the drive to end the first half, which both of those were, I believe, kneel downs, or Michigan just trying to run the ball, do what they could to run the clock out and just get out of there. 5 out of the 10 Michigan drives that weren't within like a minute left in either half ended in just 5 plays or less, lasted just 5 plays or less. In fact, they averaged just 4.67 plays per drive. So when you're not getting first downs, when you're going 3 and out, again, when you have that lack of cohesion offensively between the quarterback, the offensive coordinator, the offensive line, by the way, I saw some people out there highlighting Brady Norton, kind of having the same issues, by the way, as Gio El-Hadi last year, where he's pulling around on some run fronts for some RPO plays and things like that, and not pulling quite correctly, not hitting his blocks, not hitting his keys. Tight ends, by the way, Michigan was down to their 3rd string tight end. Speaking of the injuries in this game that we mentioned a minute ago. So Michigan, just time and time again, when they got the ball, it was 3, 4, maybe 5 plays. Maybe you get a first down, and then you punt the ball right back to Oklahoma. That's not winning football. And then stat number 2 in this game, which is really interesting to me. I didn't go back and double check this. I really want to go back into like the history books and see the last time that this happened. Maybe it actually did happen sometime last year, as a matter of fact, now that I think about it. I wouldn't doubt, actually, now that I think about it, that Michigan did this in like the Illinois game, or the Washington game last year. I've kind of memory hold those games to a certain extent. I just do not want to talk about that Illinois game from last year. That game still annoys the hell out of me. The fact that they even played Jack Tuttle, just woof. But stat number 2 is the fact that Michigan lost this game despite winning the rushing battle. Michigan outgained Oklahoma on the ground 151 yards to 142. They averaged 4.87 yards per carry to Oklahoma's 3.74. Their average yards per carry were over an entire yard more. And yes, the Justice Haynes run, which we'll break down in a few minutes here, was probably a big part of that. You know, it kind of helps when you get a 75-yard touchdown run. That was actually half of Michigan's rushing yards right there. But they count. All yards count equally when you're talking about averages. And at the end of the day, that one play gave Michigan 7 out of the 13 points that they scored. So yes, it counts. They also had a yards per play that was incredibly close. Michigan 5.32 to Oklahoma's 5.64. So what does that tell us really? Well, Oklahoma's offense on like a play-by-play basis was actually not really outperforming Michigan's offense by all that much. This was one of those kind of weird games where one team doesn't really outperform the other to like the extent that it really looks like. And again, I said at the outset here, it looked like Oklahoma could have been up by multiple scores, and they really could have been. You know, if you take away the muff punt, if you take away the interception, if you take away the, roughing the kicker and things like that, Oklahoma would have only possessed the ball over Michigan even more. They would have been able to lean on Michigan even more, and they probably would have opened up a 2-touchdown lead that actually stuck for a while. The big difference in this game, and this is stat number 3 really, the big difference in this game to me, looking at these stats, looking at these analytics, and seeing how these offenses actually on a down-to-down basis, on like an early downs basis, given what each team did on like first and second down consistently, the fact that that was actually rather even. The big difference in this game, and I know I'm being a little cliche here, was third down. Oklahoma just simply outperformed Michigan on third down. They were able to keep drives alive. They were able to score touchdowns on drives instead of merely settling for field goals. And John Mateer, I have to say it, is a magician. That dude is everything he was hyped up to be. He is a baller. He is a gamer. He is a hooper. Some big third down conversions and some big moments that kept some drives alive that we're about to get into in a minute here, by the way, with our 3 big plays. Oklahoma was 9 of 17 on third down. The Michigan's just 3 of 14. 6 more third down conversions that kept drives alive and again ended up scoring points. They were simply better on third down. They kept drives alive. They managed to hit a few big plays. The big play deep to Deion Burks, the touchdown to Deion Burks. Some of the John Mateer runs in critical moments, especially on that drive that really end the game and seal the deal, where it was John Mateer run, John Mateer run, John Mateer run over and over again. They got the plays they needed that gave them the edge and put them over the top in this one. So those are our 3 big stats for the game. Let's get into our 3 big plays right here. All right, so now it's time for our 3 big plays of the game. And I want to take you guys to the very first Oklahoma possession, because I think this was a tone setter. This was a game setter. And I want you guys to think of kind of an alternate reality, especially speaking as Michigan fans here. We're going to think of all the little ways in which Michigan could have been more competitive, kept this game closer, or dare I say it, even win this game. On that first Oklahoma drive, in their very first possession, before they even got a single first down, it looked like Wink's defense, again, I thought they played well, and the stats say that, by the way, too. Oklahoma only had an EPA per play in this game of like 0.08. That's nothing great. That's nothing crazy. John Mateer, by the way, had like a yards per dropback of like 7.5. That's not insane or outstanding by any means. They just had a few big plays, and on this drive, well, they had one, because in the first 2 plays, they got in like a yard on a run play, and then they had an incomplete pass. They were facing a 3rd and 9. It looked like Wink's defense was playing well early. Looked like they had a good plan, which I do think ultimately they did. Sometimes you can have a great defensive plan, by the way. Sometimes you can play great defense, and a team just comes out and, dare I say it, Baker Mayfield's you. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, John Mateer is just, he was a rabbit pulling tricks out of it. He was a rabbit pulling tricks out of it. Wow, that is... I'm recording this in the mornings. My brain is not fully activated, I guess you could say. He was a magician pulling rabbits out of his hat. There we go. We got that Mateer magic going. I mean, the play where he avoided Brandon Hillman for that sack, Brandon Hillman doesn't get shunted like that. Like, that doesn't usually happen. But John Mateer somehow made it happen. And then he found Deion Burks deep downfield, and that just another big play in that game. But again, I digress. On this particular instance, Mateer pulls some magic out. Michigan's blitz, Michigan's pressure. By the way, the blitz packages in this game I don't think were bad, because sometimes they did kind of catch Mateer off. He was just on point on this game. That dude was hyper aware. It was like he had spidey senses out there. It was crazy. On that 3rd and 9, Mateer is able to scramble around a little bit, or manipulate the pocket a little bit, I should say. I don't think it was like a scramble. But pressure was coming in his face, and I think what he saw was split safeties on the back end and a seam route up the middle, and he found his tight end, Kennick, over the middle for a 31-yard gain, and the ball just careened into Kennick's right hand. I believe it was his right hand. Made basically a one-handed catch, corralled it with his fingertips. I mean, you want to talk about like spidey senses. It was like he had the Spider-Man ability to just like cling to anything, and he clung to the ball, grabbed it out of the air. And I think that really, really set the tone for this game. Because like I said, Mateer is a baller. Mateer is a gamer. Mateer is a hooper. What do hoopers need to see at the beginning of a game? You're talking about like your Steph Curry's, your Magic Johnsons, your LeBron James, your, Michael Jordans throughout the years. Whether or not they're going to have a really great game sometimes is set by the fact that they hit a shot early. They hit that one shot with like a defender in their face, or they hit that long three, or they hit that turnaround fadeaway jumper, and it's like, okay, this guy's on tonight. We got to watch out for this guy. That was that moment that I think Mateer saw it. He saw his shot go in, and he was like, okay, I got this. And the confidence just built up from there. Looking back on it, if Oklahoma had gone 3 and out there and punted the ball to Bryce Underwood and company, how much different would that feel for Bryce walking onto the field? Because in the position he ended up walking into the field in, they were already down a score. Oklahoma had that big 31-yard play. They also had some other outstanding plays on that drive. And the reality of it was Bryce is probably walking onto that field thinking, I got to do something here. We got to do something offensively. We got to get some points. We got to counterpunch, because I don't know if my defense is going to be here all night. Well, think about an alternate reality where Oklahoma goes 3 and out and punts the ball, and Bryce Underwood's probably trotting out onto that field a little more confident, with a little more swag, with a little more, okay, we got this. Even if we make a mistake here, even if we go 3 and out, I know my defense has got our backs. And you can't tell me that doesn't affect young quarterbacks. It does. It does, especially playing on the road in a hostile environment against a really good team. Second big play of the game, I'm going to take you to the 1:45 mark to go of the second quarter, and I think this is actually really huge. Really huge. OU is up 7 at this point. And again, we're within the 2-minute range leading up to the half. So we're within the framework of our 2-minute offense here, right? It's a 3rd and 7. They're at their own 45-yard line. And again, think of like alternate realities here. Michigan here has a chance to force the punt with enough time left on the clock to maybe do something, maybe get a field goal at the very least and score, and then do the classic double up. They were getting the ball coming out of half. So, in an alternate reality, again, Michigan forces a punt here. They get the ball back, maybe they kick a field goal, and it's 7-3 at half, instead of what actually ends up happening, which is that Oklahoma converts that 3rd down on that 3rd and 7 with more Mateer magic, and they ultimately end up going to hit Keontae Lewis for an 11-yard gain. On that 3rd and 7 play, they ultimately also end up going to score a touchdown, and it's 14-0 at half instead of potentially 7-3, or dare I say it, even 7-7. And again, Michigan has that kind of double up opportunity. Now, we saw Justice Haynes score on the very first play of the second half, but how much bigger would that play have been had it again been a tie ball game, or at the very least just a 7-0 game where you force that punt, and then maybe you're not able to do anything offensively, but at least you're only down a score at half. That was a big swing moment to me. And then this one isn't really a play so much as just a drive. This was the killer. This was the knife in the heart. This was the dagger through the heart of Michigan's chances here. In fact, if you look at the game on paper statistics, you see the win probability. It had actually dipped down to like 89% or something like that at one point in the second half. And then as soon as Oklahoma started to go on this drive, it shot right up. And by the end of this drive, it was like 98.7% or something like that. It's a drive we mentioned earlier in the video. Again, they got the ball with 10 minutes left in the game, and they went on a 16-play, 8.5-minute drive. They Michigan. I hate to say it, but they did to Michigan what Michigan has done to Ohio State over the previous few seasons, where they get the ball late in game, it's still within a touchdown or a field goal or something like that, and they just took the air out of the ball. They ran with John Mateer. They were not afraid of running John Mateer in this game at all, by the way, and John Mateer, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, sometimes you got to tip your hat and just say, good game, son. You played well. You did what you needed to do to win the game. So those were really my 3 big plays, my 3 big moments in this game. Let's break down a play, though. Let's do that. Let's look at the film. Let's break down a play, one of the good plays from this game, and then we'll get to my final kind of main takeaways from this whole game right here. All right, and here we go with our play breakdown, and you guys had to have known. You guys had to have known that it was going to be the Justice Haynes run. And now 2 things I want you guys to take away from this play. I want you guys to watch Haynes cut here. I want you to see the feel that he has for the cutback lane. And this is something we scouted on him. This is actually something I was really excited about concerning him when it came to his transition to Michigan through the transfer portal. Over on the other channel, we did a film review of him and what he was doing at Alabama before coming to Michigan. And I'm not going to lie, it sounded hyperbolic at the time, but I'm starting to see it now. There's some Blake Corum to his game. So I want you guys to, obviously, given the fact that this is a 75-yard touchdown run by the back, I want you guys to watch what the back is doing. I also want you guys to watch the way that the offensive line blocks and the movement that they get in this direction. I want you guys to watch the way he finds the cutback lane right here. But I also want you guys to watch for what Oklahoma is doing with these 2 guys in particular right here. Because I think Oklahoma, Brent Venables, really, he didn't get caught with his pants down very often in this game, and give him credit. Oklahoma came out with a great defensive game plan, especially for, countering Bryce Underwood. But just watch what those 2 players do on this play right here. So Michigan pulling a guard around. I believe that's a Phobie. I believe this is to the point where he had already replaced El Hadi. And they're adding Bredesen. So this looks like some sort of power play. I'm not actually 100% sure. This is definitely a gap play, though. Somebody out there may know. I'm not too well read up on my specific run plays. But I do know this. Michigan ends up kind of walling off right here pretty well. And then watch Haynes. Initially, his eyes, if we're drawing up kind of a vision cone, are going this way. But watch the feel he has, and watch his use of peripheral vision to find this cutback lane, make a really great cut, and now he's off to the races. And if you've been watching those players I told you to watch, I don't know if one of them was coming on a blitz and one of them was supposed to have outside contain. Let's actually run it back a little bit right here, right to right here. Now, defense 101, somebody's got to have outside contain. Usually it's a corner when there's no wide receiver out here. Michigan's in heavy personnel. They got Bredesen in there. They got 1 wide receiver split out. They got multiple quote-unquote tight ends, but they're actually offensive linemen. I don't know if anyone noticed in this game, but Michigan came out in those mammoth packages again, which was really interesting. And they actually worked to some effect. I actually wish they would have gone somewhat with the Penn State game plan from 2023 and just run the ball more. But that's just me. I'm an old school, die-hard Michigan fan. I love watching Michigan run the football all day, 24/7, till the cows come home. But again, I digress. Somebody should have this outside contain, which means you should be setting the edge. You should get anything that tries to stretch out towards the boundary here to make sure that Haynes can't just get the ball, hit the sideline, and run home. Watch what both of those guys do, though. So we get the blitz. That's definitely a blitz. This guy triggers as well, though, and he overplays his hand. He overextends, and now look at this right here. He's kind of setting an edge, but Haynes has already got an angle on him. He's already got a beat on him, and he finds himself behind the play or it's too late. And now all Haynes has to do is beat these safeties here, and he's off to the races. And I don't know if you've seen Justice Haynes play lately, but when he's got a beat on you, it's a bad beat, and he's off to the races. That's our play breakdown for this week. Let's get to our final takeaways of this game and preview next week and the coming weeks right here. So what are my real overarching thoughts on this game, and what are my thoughts going forward? Well, again, I think we're looking at Oklahoma being a really good team. I think Oklahoma showed some things in this game. They played, given the mistakes that they made, they played a B to B- game as a team, but they were really carried by a quarterback who, on third downs especially, avoiding sacks, avoiding hits, stepping up, keeping his eyes downfield, running the football, by the way. He was like a more effective Riley Leonard in this game. He was like Riley Leonard with an arm, was what he was. That's really what we were looking at in this game. You got to tip your hat, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, to OU just being a really good team. And I would not be surprised at all if Oklahoma finishes in the top 2 or 3 of the entire SEC. I really wouldn't be. With what their defense has shown, that defensive front is really good, by the way. Really well coached. Outside of that play we just broke down, they were rarely out of position. And they have a quarterback. They have the quarterback this year, which is what they needed last year. Like Michigan, Oklahoma still managed to beat a top 5 to 10 team at the time they played them in Alabama, despite not even having a quarterback last year, despite not having an offensive line, despite not having an offense. So, again, these two teams were, by the way, really similar in terms of what they did last year to what they have coming in this year. There were some big mistakes Oklahoma made, but they overcame them. I think that's actually a quality of a really good team when you can play a bad game on one side of the ball. The special teams for Oklahoma were just not there in this game. They actually had a negative special teams EPA of like 2.98 or something like that, and they still managed to win. So again, hats off to them. That is a really good team over there. There's no shame in losing to a team like this, by the way. And I think that's the thing going forward. This game was a game of growing pains. Growing pains for Bryce Underwood. Again, miscommunication. Multiple instances, by the way, where Bryce could have had a touchdown. He had a tight end open on a wheel route that would have been wide open. I think Oklahoma was in cover 0 or cover 1 on that play. Oklahoma, by the way, plays a lot of cover. They play a lot of robber coverages where they have a lot of guys over the middle. Some people were complaining that Michigan wasn't hitting things over the middle. I saw in my Discord and out there generally. And if you know anything about like robber coverages, you're just not, that's not the area of the field to attack. The area of the field to attack is usually those one-on-ones on either side of the field, but I digress. This was a game of growing pains, but I want you to think about this. I really want you guys to think about this. These growing pains are necessary for a young quarterback who still has all the skill in the world, by the way. I have the stat line down there, 9 of 24 for 142 yards in a road debut. It does not look great statistically, was not productive, was certainly not enough to win this game. But in considering the context of this young man having just turned 18, having the weight of the world on his shoulders, again, like we said earlier in the video, he didn't even touch the football in this game until Michigan was already down by a score. So always playing from behind on the road as a young quarterback, that's difficult. That's difficult, especially with a new offensive coordinator that you're trying to get on the same page with, an offensive line that wasn't particularly playing well against one of the best defensive fronts in the country, and wide receivers that you have to get on the same page with. So I want you guys to think about this. This is really my opinion on it. I would have much, much rather played this game against this opponent, this really good opponent, than taking a cupcake game against a Western Michigan or a Toledo or some FCS school, against Grambling State like Ohio State played this weekend. I would have much rather had this game because there's stuff to learn from this game. You don't learn anything from playing bad opponents who don't show you anything on film, who, don't disguise their coverages very well, who don't cover very well generally, who don't have skilled, talented players out there. Iron sharpens iron, and Michigan ran up against some iron in this game. Some heavy iron, by the way. I think Oklahoma's really good defensively. And again, considering the context here, I think Bryce Underwood still hit some throws. He tried some things. He tried some throws. That throw to Jordan Marshall. I'm going to get Jordan Marshall and Zach Marshall mixed up throughout the year, especially if Zach Marshall ends up playing more. that throw deep to Zach Marshall, Zach had his guy beat. And if that's Marlon Klein, I think Marlon Klein comes down with that ball because he's obviously the more athletic, more gifted tight end there. By the way, Marlon Klein reminds me a lot of AJ Barner. The ability to block and catch the football is crazy. So what I want to see going forward, especially from Chip Lindsey, and I know I've talked a lot about the offense in this one, but the defense I really didn't think did anything necessarily wrong. Zeke got beat deep once. By the way, Jair Hill had a great near interception in this game. We talk about moments where it's like just an inch here or there and you're close. You know, if that tight end doesn't make the catch for Oklahoma on their first drive, if Zach Marshall comes down with that catch, if Jair Hill comes up with that interception, this is an entirely different football game. But I think going forward, and this is going to be an offensive critique, because again, I think the defense actually considering the assignment here played well. I think going forward, Chip Lindsey needs to find the proper formula. And I say that because we know the formula. We know what it needs to be, at least in its construction. It needs to be, how do I mix my Gus Malzahn throwing screens, getting the quarterback involved in the run game, by the way. That's the big difference in this game, too. I didn't even mention it in this video. Oh, my God. I didn't even mention it in this video. Sorry, ESPN just... something probably made noise in the background. I'm sorry. The difference in this game was Oklahoma was willing to run their quarterback, and Michigan wasn't. I think we do need to see some quarterback runs in the future, especially if Bryce Underwood isn't quite there with his receivers yet. I think what you need to do is, during the week in practice, you need to work on that communication with the receivers, that cohesiveness there. And then on Saturdays, run him a little bit more. On a 3rd and 2, on a 3rd and 4, on a 2nd and 5. Run some quarterback bash, run some zone read. And I know some people are afraid of him getting injured, but we got to stop being afraid all the time. We got to stop being scared. We got to play fearless. We got to root for our team to go out there and do what needs to be done. Was Oklahoma afraid of John Mateer getting injured for the year this past Saturday? Didn't seem like it. Didn't seem like Brett Venables cared. Seemed like Brett Venables knew he had a quarterback who can, he can squat 500 pounds or something ridiculous like that. He's a tough guy with a good frame. What is Bryce Underwood? Tough guy with a good frame, 6'5", 230 pounds. Was Auburn afraid of running Cam Newton? No. Those are the natural risks you take with football. By the way, you're much more likely to get injured as a quarterback in the pocket right after a throw when you're vulnerable, when your shoulder's out there, when your arm's out there, when you're in a vulnerable, indefensible position. There's been studies on that. That's just a science. That needs to happen going forward, I think, because I think through the week in practice, you get that cohesion, you get those relationships with the receivers, and then you still throw the ball. Don't get me wrong. You want to have some multiplicity to this offense. But again, getting back to what I was saying a minute ago, sorry I got sidetracked there because I realized I didn't even mention the biggest thing in this whole game was that Oklahoma ran their quarterback and Michigan didn't. And because Oklahoma ran their quarterback, they sustained drives, they converted 3rd downs, and they scored touchdowns with it. But again, I digress. Chip Lindsey needs to figure out exactly what the formula is what I'm saying. He needs to find a way to add his stuff on to what Michigan already does, to work Bryce Underwood into the offense more. That's really the formula. How do I mix my stuff with what Michigan already does and also get Bryce Underwood? How do I get the most out of him? I think really that's it. That's the formula, but the specifics of how that formula comes together is really important. How much of this do I add here? How much of this do I lean on? How much of this do I add? What is the A plus B plus C of the whole thing? I think that's really important. So those are really my main takeaways. I thought the defense, again, actually played really well. 3 players I want to highlight defensively, by the way. Jair Hill, TJ Metcalf with that interception. Damon Payne, I thought, played really well, especially in run defense. I think they all had really great games. I thought Jayshon Barham came in and made an immediate difference. You notice Oklahoma scored 14 points in the first half and then 10 in the second. Well, they scored fewer points in the second half than they did in the first half. They really ultimately just scored that touchdown and then got a field goal late after a long sustained drive when Michigan's defense, again, was already tired. So I think Jayshon Barham made a difference. Some supporting stats, by the way, to the defense's performance in this game. just to finish out here, they held OU to just 0.09 EPA per rush, just 3.5 yards per rush, 0.07 EPA per dropback. I think I referenced it a few minutes. It's actually wrong. 0.08 EPA per play as an offense as a whole. That's actually only in the 59th percentile, according to GameOnPaper.com. And Michigan's defense actually had a havoc rate of 12%. Now, the pass rush wasn't quite there, what I thought it should be, namely Derek Moore. I don't think Derek Moore had the game that he could have had against these Oklahoma tackles that aren't very good. But that's an above average havoc rate. So that was a great performance by the defense. There's a lot to take away on the positive side here. And again, I think these are necessary growing pains to being the team and having the quarterback that they want to have later in the year. I'd honestly much rather take this loss now out of conference against a really good opponent and go into conference with the potential to fix all these issues than play a cupcake where we don't actually know what these issues are, because cupcakes don't highlight your issues. They don't point out your weaknesses that you need to fix. They're just cupcakes. You just eat them and you get fat. And that's going to be this week in Michigan football. Hope you guys really like it. Hope you guys really appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time. And until then, as always, be kind to other people there.